Welcome back, y'all. This is the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr.
I'm Hunter Zeisman.
And we have a very fun episode 2 coming for you. Super excited for the season. It's week 1. Week 0 gave us a lot of fun with Florida State and Georgia Tech. And this week we get SEC football. We're finally back. You can sit on your couch from 12 to about 11 p.m. and you'll see some marquee games. So for this episode, we're going to talk about 3 main things. Last episode, we went through a team-by-team breakdown and our predictions, as well as pointing out key players. And in this episode, we're going to take those predictions and walk through our playoff bracket predictions, our top 5 games of the week, the new SEC podcast game of the week. Yeah, we're back. And then we're also going to go through the rest of the games in the conference. Week 1, produces a ton of key highlight games and also has some tune-up games for the conference. And so we're really excited to talk through a good amount of them. And then, of course, follow, like, subscribe to our Instagram as well as YouTube and now on Spotify. So really, Hunter, what did you kind of think about week 0? Did it really get the palate going? Did it make you feel anything? Did it make you hungrier for week 1?
I think so. I mean, everyone loves to see a good upset. Good for Georgia Tech there, going over to Ireland and beating Florida State. It was the perfect way to start the football season. No shade to Florida State, but excited for football. I mean, there's nothing like SEC football, and we have some good games week 1. They're not all cupcake tune-up games. We have some really good ones to talk about, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, I felt similarly. As I mentioned, live in Atlanta, Georgia. I made a point to go to a Georgia Tech bar, and I was ready for whatever was going to come. And it was quite a game. That kick at the end was exciting, and happy for Brent Key, Nick Saban, family tree as a head coach over at Georgia Tech. So good for him to pull that out. And luckily for Florida State, with the new 12-team playoff format, their season's not over when it comes to potentially achieving the goals they want to achieve, which would be making the playoff and making the championship. So really fun. And of course, we had other games as well, but that was the main, we'll say, ranked game matchup of week 0. And now we're in week 1.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to bring up, is that a loss doesn't mean your season's over. And that's because of the 12-team playoff. There's also a couple other changes that all the conferences have adopted from the ACC, which are going to also be a point in why Florida State season's not over and why other teams can afford a loss. And that is the new way of conferences determining the teams that will go. So let's dive into it and talk a little bit about what that means and what the conference games change, what changes with the conference games, right? We talked about it a little bit last week, but there's no more East and West in the SEC. Big 10 followed a similar thing. Big 12, ACC, it's all going to be the top 2 teams play for the conference championship. SEC came out since our last episode with what their tiebreakers are going to be. Everyone was curious if you have 3 10-2 teams or 3 11-1 teams, who gets the nod to go to Atlanta and play in the SEC game. So let's run through those rules really quickly and answer any questions that anyone might have about what that means. So first and foremost, rule number 1 in determining who goes to Atlanta is going to be head-to-head. If those 2 teams have played, whoever won, they get to go. Pretty self-explanatory. That doesn't shake it out. Number 2 is head-to-head against all common opponents in the conference. So who beat Ole Miss? If one beat Ole Miss and the other one lost to them, then the team that won will get the nod. So that's number 2. Number 3 is where we'll stop, because I doubt it ever going past this point, and that's going to be the record against the highest placed SEC teams. And that's looking at the conference standings at the end of the year. So that is how they're breaking it down, and that's who is going to go. Once that we get further along in the season, if we ever have any tiebreaker scenarios, we can walk through those then. But wanted to run through that.
Yeah, and it's really important to mention, right? You talked about it earlier. Every conference, every major Power 4 conference added about 2 to 4 additional new teams, right? Big 10 added Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. Big 12 added a ton of new teams. The ACC added Cal, Stanford, as well as SMU. And then, the SEC added 2 more teams to make it 16. So with that, they decided to do away with divisions, and that's where the tiebreakers play a key role. It should be exciting. And again, the tiebreakers are important because not every team is playing the same common opponents. So you have to have these different differentiators if that first tiebreaker doesn't settle the tie. And so it should be a fun one. It played a role in my prediction where I had three teams going 11-1 with Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. And nonetheless, I don't see it going past that third tiebreaker of, common opponents with the best record. But if it does, there's that. And then I think the fifth or sixth one was like a coin toss. So if they do that, I hope they do it at like a random truck stop or some, unique restaurant in Tuscaloosa or in Columbia, South Carolina, or Columbia, Missouri, just to kind of, add more oomph to the moment. So
yeah, make it a pay-per-view event, do a duck race or something crazy, right?
Right.
No,
I'm sure the networks would find a way to monetize that event for sure if it ever came down to it. And we'd have to make sure that the coin is the right weight and whatnot.
all that. No, it's good to bring up, and it's going to shake out who gets to go to the playoffs. And that was something from the last episode to now that we had some questions about and wanted to highlight. So why don't we do this, Randall? Why don't we pop up your predictions here, take a look at them, and kind of run through the way this shakes out, who gets 1 through 4 in anyone's predictions. How does 1 through 4 go with the conference champions? So let's take a look at that and break it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'm going to pop up my predictions here. This year, it's a 12-team format. For members for people that have been watching college football, the last 10 years, we've had a 4-team playoff. That was revolutionary. It took a ton of time to get that approved. The 4-team playoff, the way that worked was there was a committee of ADs and other professionals that would, throughout the season, every Tuesday, create this set of rankings. And the rankings that mattered the most was the last set prior to after conference championship weekend and then prior to the bowl season starting. And if you were in those final 4 rankings, which typically comprised of conference champions and maybe one team that was not a conference champion but had an amazing resume and key wins, you made the playoffs. And then now we have a 12-team playoff. This is what fans have called for. This is what the nation has called for. And so the way this playoff works, and follow me here if you're watching or listening, is there's going to be 5 automatic bids that are allotted to the 5 highest conference champions in terms of the rankings in the college football playoff. So what that means is out of those 5, the top 4 highest ranked conference champs are going to be seeded 1 through 4. So most believe that's going to be the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 in no particular order from the way I just said it. But if you're 4 of the 5 highest conference ranked champs, you will be seeded 1 through 4. The 5th spot is allotted to the group of 5. So that's going to be your teams like Memphis, Boise, teams that come from the Mid-Atlantic Conference, the AAC or American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, Sun Belt. So think like Texas State or Liberty, and as well, I think there's one more I'm missing here, but nonetheless, there's 5, and then the Mountain West. There's 5 group of 5 conferences that will be allotted 1 playoff spot. So in the 10-year history of the playoffs, there's only been 1 group of 5 team that's made it. Now Cincinnati in 2021, I think they played Alabama. So it's good for the group of 5. They get a spot. And then the other 7 spots to make up 12 teams are at large. So those are going to be allotted to your non-conference champs. So that could be the SEC runner-up, the Big 12 runner-up, the ACC runner-up, a third team in the SEC. So you heard us last week talking about it. Maybe the SEC gets 4 or 5 teams in. One of those being a conference champ block, 3 to 4 of those being at large. And so with that format, once they have those teams, those conference champs, they're going to reseed them based upon the ranking. So if you look here at my predictions, I'm predicting that Georgia wins the SEC championship. And I had Georgia playing Alabama in the SEC championship. And then for my second seed, I had Ohio State. So I'm predicting Ohio State's going to beat Oregon in the conference championship. Yes, Oregon is in the Big 10. For my third team, I have Utah. Utah's in the Big 12. I have them winning the conference championship over Arizona. And then for my 4th seed, I have Miami. The ACC is a crapshoot, so who knows what's going to happen? Maybe it's Florida State, maybe it's Clemson, but I have Miami winning the conference championship over Clemson. And I mentioned Clemson and Arizona because I also have them for my other seeds, right? After 1 through 4, then the remaining 7 seeds are at large. Many predict that the group of 5 champ will most likely get the 12 seed, just given the strength of schedule for that particular region of football. So I picked Memphis. Memphis has traditionally been a power when it comes to the group of 5. They've had a New Year's 6 appearance a couple years ago against Penn State in the Cotton Bowl. They have some great returning talent. They have a returning quarterback who's really favorable. So I have Memphis playing Alabama. Alabama was my runner-up in the SEC. So this is what I believe is going to happen, and I have Alabama losing to Georgia, but they still have an opportunity to make the playoffs. It gets interesting in that 6 versus 11 matchup where it's Oregon versus Ole Miss. So if you remember from our last episode, we felt like Ole Miss's schedule was very favorable. Their big games and only big games are really LSU and Oklahoma. They don't have to play Tennessee. They don't have to play Alabama, right? I have them getting the 11 seed. I have Texas getting the 7 seed at 11-1 and playing Arizona. Arizona would have been my Big 12 runner-up. So the Big 12 gets 2 teams. And then, the last matchup is the 8 versus 9. Penn State fans would love this. I have Penn State as the 9 seed playing Clemson as the 8 seed. So Clemson's able to either, if they take a loss week 1, they can redeem it despite maybe losing in the ACC championship. But nonetheless, they will get that 8 versus 9 to produce that 12-team playoff. Hunter, what are your thoughts there?
I like your predictions. I think that you have all of the key teams in there. I think there's some long shots, right? Arizona, Penn State, who gets multiple teams in, because some conferences are going to have to get 3 or 4 to fill this thing out. I like it. We'll see how it goes. Let's flip over, not to try to compete with you here, but let's see what I got on my 12 team.
I'm excited, man. This is my first time seeing it, so let's see what you got.
Yeah. So number 1, I got Ole Miss. I think that they're going to go the distance this season. I haven't been shy about it. I like Ole Miss. I have them playing Alabama in the SEC championship game and getting that 1 seed. Number 2, Oregon beating Ohio State. So if Oregon plays Ohio State, I'm sure we'll both be watching that one, trying to figure out whose winner goes.
I think they play week 4 as well this year, so that'll also be fun.
Yeah,
not to derail you.
No, it's a good point, and it's tough when teams play twice in 1 year for a team to take both. We've seen it with Alabama and Georgia in the past years, where if they have to play in the SEC championship, just because Alabama wins doesn't mean they'll win the championship game. So, as much as I hate to bring it up, we could see that happen here too. Yep. Number 3, I have Virginia Tech, ACC winner. It's a hot take, but I'm on the Kyron Drones Heisman bandwagon this year, so we'll see what he can do and if they can pull it out for the ACC. Number 4, I have Utah. Where things are a little different is the amount of SEC teams I have in my top 12. I have 5 SEC teams making up my top 12, which is a bit of a homer SEC take, but we are the new SEC podcast. It's what we want to see, right?
Yeah.
From the SEC, we have Alabama, Mizzou, Georgia, LSU, and Ole Miss at that 1 spot. So I love Mizzou's chances this year if they can pull it out in a couple big games. I think that they'll look at the strength of that team and the strength of their schedule and put them in there. LSU also, it's going to take a pretty unlikely scenario for all of this to shake out and get 5. But if you have a couple teams sitting there at 10-2 with Georgia, Mizzou, and LSU, they're all 10-2. They might look stronger than some other conferences teams there. Miami, we'll see if they can get it done early, but I have them there at the 10. People might not want to see Georgia with the 11 beside them and be a little bit critical of that. How do you bet against Georgia? There's 1 too many ones beside Georgia. Most people have them as their 1 seed. But I'm rooting for Alabama and Ole Miss. So I think that they got it. I got Penn State in there as well as the 3rd Big 10 team. And then Boise State is my group of 5. Would love to see them in there. Would love to see some competition from the group of 5 team. Was happy when Cincinnati made it, not just because Alabama got to play them, but because it is good for college football to have some new faces make it into the running.
Definitely. And I like the 5 teams you picked from the SEC have a great shot. We talked about LSU and their upside this year. Missouri has probably the, top 3 easiest SEC schedule. And even with 12 teams, we're still going to miss teams. There's, as you see here, there's no Michigan, there's no Notre Dame. There's only one Big 12 school. I think there's two ACC schools, and so it does get really tough to pick. And I think it'll encourage more strategic scheduling by each team every year to make their schedule harder, which I felt like was kind of going away with the 4-team playoff. Like you lost one game, your season was almost over, so you wanted to be a little more selective with who you schedule. Now it's make your schedule strong. You can afford to drop a game, and the harder you make your schedule, the more opportunities you have to get key wins. And that's maybe where you saw Georgia, right? They have just as hard of a schedule as Florida, so they have more landmines and more opportunities to kind of trip up. But that allows them to cover ground and still be a part of that 12 team. The next thing I would say I look at is these first round matchups. Maybe I find your bracket more fun than mine, but I like Missouri at Miami, or Miami's coming to Missouri. Got to mention that. This is the first playoff where the first round games are going to be hosted at the home team. So Miami would be going to Columbia. Georgia would be going to Columbus, Ohio. Boise State would be coming to Tuscaloosa. Like I don't know if I ever imagined seeing that. And I think out of these 4 SEC versus other conference first round matchups, the most interesting one to me would definitely be Ohio State versus Georgia. And then maybe, Miami versus Missouri.
Yeah, no, there's some interesting matchups that could happen. We love to see out of conference matchups. I mean, we're going to talk about a couple week 1 ones here, but anytime teams can play someone outside of their normal regiment, their normal routine, it's always fun to see because people want to talk. Who's the best conference? Is it the SEC? Is it the Big Ten? Not as many people say in ACC this year. No shade, but that we'll get to see it. We'll get to see it right out front with that home field advantage from the teams that earned it throughout the year. So just because you're 11-10 seed, you're not getting additional favor with this expansion. You're still having to go play a tough game on the road. So those are our predictions there. We'll see how correct we are as the season goes on. I'm sure we'll be updating these a lot as teams win and teams lose, and there will be a lot of changes. Don't worry. Let us know how we did. If there's some things that you disagree with or some teams that you think deserve to be in there, Notre Dame probably being one of them, let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Like you said, we'd love to hear who you think we missed, who you think we got right. If you have any questions on the format, the playoff format, we could talk about it, but I have to mention this point. We spend every year trying to determine who's the best conference. And, Capital One does this like conference challenge for the bowl games, and bowl games have kind of become not as meaningful with the portal and players leaving. So we finally get to see more out of conference games with this playoff format with games that matter. So it'll be really fun to see. And it won't dilute the regular season. It'll only make it more meaningful as the season goes on and whatnot. So really excited here.
Let's shift gears and go talk about our first big game of the week and what we think is going to happen. So first big game that we have this week is one that I'm sure everyone has on their calendars. They circled it. It's going to be 12 p.m. Sit on the couch and turn on some football right after game day ends. And it is Clemson Tigers going to Atlanta and playing the Georgia Bulldogs at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Going to be a good one. It's been a couple years since they've done this. 2021, they played this game and Georgia won 10-3 then. I think we'll see a different game here.
Yeah, definitely think we'll see a different game here. I think DJU was the quarterback at the time for Clemson, and JT Daniels was part-time quarterback with Stetson Bennett. It was out in Charlotte. So this year it's in Atlanta. It's a great way to start the season. Both teams have a strong shot to win their conference, and it'll be fun. Like Clemson last year, first season in a while, they didn't have a 10-win season. They returned Cade Klubnik. I was doing some research. It feels like he's been in college for so long, but he's only a junior. He had 19 touchdowns last year to 9 picks. Showed a ton of bright upside as a team. They ripped off 5 straight wins to end the season. Big wins over Kentucky and the Gator Bowl and some of the other games as well. And also another player to watch for Clemson would probably be Phil Maffa, their running back. He's going to replace the production from Will Shipley, who went to the NFL for the Eagles. Highly touted 5-star recruit in the NFL now, but It should be an interesting one. They return a lot of production on defense at Clemson, so they ranked about 8th in the nation when it comes to total yards allowed, which will be fun to see how they match up against Carson Beck and that newly revamped Georgia offense.
Yeah.
Go ahead after you.
Well, I was going to say, you brought up Phil Maffa, and that's a great point. He had that dynamic duo with Will Shipley last year, and now they lost half of that. So what does the power back do this year? You almost had 1,000 yards last season. And looking at Georgia, where if you talk about how good Georgia is, you're not, bringing anything new to anyone's attention. Everyone wants to, they hear how good Georgia is. It's tough to find, something to talk negatively about. But the only thing to maybe bring up there when you talk about Phil Maffa is that Georgia was 43rd last year in rushing yards allowed. They were the first Georgia team since 2018 to let up over 3 yards per carry. So when you bring a guy like Phil Maffa in, you have someone tough on the ground. So it's a great point to bring up with him and the power and seniority that he brings to this team.
Definitely. And I think that, a lot of people are looking at this matchup. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but looking at this and just thinking of Georgia's traditional defense and, it has ranked very highly, but the rushing defense was definitely an area of opportunity. Players such as Mikael Williams at defensive end, first round projected defensive end, has stated that like last season was not really like he felt like he could have provided more, right? And on the offensive side, Georgia made some really key pickups, picking up Dominic Lovett from Missouri. He had 613 yards and 4 touchdowns. Probably saw an even bigger role for himself at UGA. And then picking up Trevor Etienne, of course, with 753 yards and 8 touchdowns. So it'll be a really fun matchup to see how they kind of duke it out, and how each team can really show off their strengths.
Yeah, no, and it's the weapons on Georgia is what people are going to be looking at. He lost his 2 favorite weapons to the draft. There's no shortage of media out there about what Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers are about to do in the NFL. But how do you fill the gaps that they leave at Georgia? I mean, Bowers went down last year and Oscar Delp stepped in and played great. He was ready for that role. I think he comes in as the great weapon for Beck this year, where he has that outlet, someone he can throw to every time across the middle. That is going to be the key for them. And also Colby Young to Miami transfer coming in. He's going to be great at the X out wide. It's Georgia, it's recruiting. It's how do you reload and continue to keep the momentum going year over year. So their offense, I don't think, is going to be missing a step, and they're going to be firing on all cylinders again.
Definitely. And again, like on the defensive front, you look at, so many good players that come from the program. Jordan Davis, a D tackle, Nolan Smith, OLB, rush end, and Kristen Miller is another one of those players who's really kind of hoping to step into that Jordan Davis type role for them to help, take that leap on the run defense side, as they're kind of matched and paired against, Cade and Phil Maffa as well. So, I think I had this game going to Georgia, and I want to say my score was 28-17.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I think you're spot on it. Where the game is going to be, we talked about Georgia's defense. Clemson hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since 2020. They don't have that weapon. I think where Georgia is going to be able to swarm the things that are working. They're great at defensive adjustments at half. Kirby Smart is great at adjusting to those things. You got him 28-17. I think 31-17. I love Georgia's chances here. I love Georgia's chances this season, although I have them dropping a couple games down the stretch. The big question for Clemson, underutilization of the portal. Does that mean that they're set on what they got, or have they not figured out how to use it? So we both got Georgia this week.
Yeah, we both got Georgia this week. Not too many other thoughts there. Like I said, I'm riding with Georgia. It's by no means a home game. Greenville, South Carolina is relatively close to Atlanta. There's a ton of Clemson alumni here in Atlanta. I see them walking around all the time and in the city. But I have Georgia taking this one. I think that they want to set the season off strong, and it should be a fun one. It's a great appetizer to start the season.
Yeah, no, we love ACC teams playing a big week one. They're trying to prove something here, that they're not the bottom. They're not one of the bottom conferences that they can compete. So we'll see. We're excited to watch that one.
Yeah, maybe it'll be an SEC tryout for Clemson. We'll see.
Could be. Another ACC team that is playing a out of conference game week one. is going to be the Virginia Tech Hokies. They are going to be playing the Vanderbilt Commodores. Not a lot of hype around Vanderbilt every year, kind of the bottom dog of the SEC. Hate to say it, but they're going to get a big opportunity in week 1 here with Virginia Tech.
Yeah, they'll get a really big opportunity. And, this is an SEC podcast. I can't help but be positive about Vanderbilt. I think they've made some bigger changes that could bode to new results, right? If something's not working, you change the coaches, you change the players. And they made a ton of moves, both in the coaching staff and the portal. On the offensive side, bringing in Tim Beck from New Mexico State, who has SEC winning experience, beating Auburn last year. They also brought in Diego Pavia at quarterback. They're going to bring kind of a quirky, run pass option offense from what I've heard and read. And so that could bode well for a team that finished about 109th in yards last year. I think per play or actually per pass attempt, if you will. And then on the defensive side, they have a, senior safety returning in CJ Taylor. He had a ton of, great stops. He led the team in tackles. And so it's really going to be key for them to improve the amount of yards per play they gave up. And Byron Jones is not going to make it easy for them, or Kyron Jones is not going to make it easy for them. And I'll let you kind of touch on the Virginia Tech opposition.
Yeah, no, it's good that you bring up the things about Vanderbilt, because they do have that revamped offense. They're going with that New Mexico State offense. Probably the only reason that I wanted to see Nate Johnson get a nod there, but I think Diego Pavia is going to be the guy. He knows the offense. He knows what to do. You mentioned Kyron Jones. In this matchup, we have 2 quarterbacks who are great improvisers. They both can make things happen, extend plays out of the pocket, finding receivers on the run, hitting the ground on their own, and getting some rush yards. We saw it when Pavia played Auburn last year. Sorry to all the Tigers fans, but he has what it takes to play some big games. And it's going to come down to the supporting cast, right? Kyron Jones is an all-star already. People are looking at him. He's back of the pack, but who knows if he could become a dark horse Heisman favorite later in this year. But it's about the supporting cast. So with Virginia Tech, he has a couple more weapons to throw to. Pavia gets out of the pocket. He's going to be scrambling a little bit, looking for who to pass to. Virginia Tech has a lot of seniority in returning receivers. They also picked up Ollie Jennings from Old Dominion. So they have weapons for him to throw to. So that's going to be the biggest thing here is which quarterback can keep consistency. I think the game will be close early on. I think Vanderbilt's going to have some things up their sleeve, like you mentioned, a quirky offense. They're going to put some stuff together to stay. Will they be able to stay the distance through halftime and extend it into the game? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and like I said, it's really going to come down to how Vanderbilt comes out, and that sounds so cliche, like how they come out, like who scores more points by the end of the game is going to win, right? But when you think about Virginia Tech, they're playing for an ACC championship appearance. Not that Vanderbilt's not playing for that, but Virginia Tech made this leap last year from 2-10 to 7-6. They return, Bioshel Tutin at running back as a junior. He was a North Carolina A&T transfer, so HBCU to Power 4 transfer. And he had about 863 yards and 10 touchdowns. So he's going to pair well with Kyron Jones, as you mentioned, who he didn't play the full season, but when he did come in, he had 15 tutties and 3 picks. So the expectations are warranted given those numbers and given that production. And I think they return, I want to say, the highest amount of players from the 22 offense and defense. That's a top 5 amount in the country. What does that all mean? I mean, there's a reason why we line the games up between the lines and play. But I think for Vanderbilt, it's a good opportunity to show what this new offense looks like. They have a lot of returning veterans on defense. And I think just new energy and new players could bode well for a good start. I ultimately have Virginia Tech winning 35-17, but this is a game worth watching. You may see Virginia Tech again in the playoffs. It will not be the last time you hear about them. And for Vanderbilt, they could show you something you've never seen. And anything's possible.
Yeah, it's tough to talk about prior struggles. Teams are new every year. We can only look at what we know with the players coming in. Vanderbilt had a tough third down defense last year. They let up a lot of conversions. If they can change that in this game, maybe get one of their linebackers, like Langston Patterson, to put some eyes on Kyron Drones when he tries to get out of there. Who knows what can happen? Things shake up. You build some momentum. Anything can go. Fun fact here before I make my pick: Virginia Tech is 0-5 against the spread on road openers in their last 5 games. But I don't care. They're covering here. Give me Virginia Tech 36-20.
Hammer it. Hammer it.
Yeah. I don't think it's free money, but we'll see. We'll see. It's not financial advice.
It should be a fun one regardless. Just excited to see games, excited to see the SEC, going toe to toe with other conferences, and a lot to look forward to. So, yeah.
Nope. It'll be a good one. An out of conference matchup that we're excited for when we're looking, again at the ACC, scheduling yet another out of conference game, trying to build some, something to talk about week 1. It's going to be the Miami Hurricanes playing the Florida Gators.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, let's just think about this slate thus far. You have Georgia versus Clemson at noon, and then at 3:30 Eastern, you have Miami versus Florida. It's going to be a fun Saturday, and the ACC, took a bold task of scheduling some really good out of conference games, and Florida took the bold task of scheduling every single Power 4 team in Florida on their schedule. But so back to this game, it should be really fun. We're going to start with the positives here. Graham Mertz last year had 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, so there's a lot to build on there. Hunter touched on it last episode, but he really was able to improve his interception woes coming in as a transfer from Wisconsin, and that's where you saw that number go down to 3 picks. A player that I'm really excited to watch is sophomore Eugene Wilson III. He was a 5-star recruit last year. He was a freshman all SEC player. He was from multiple publications, was a freshman All-American, including On3. And he led the team in touchdowns with 6 touchdowns, was second in receptions. And so optimistically, Florida just had a tough time kind of putting together both the offense and the defense. I think that if they can, really come out strong and take some of that youth from last year and add some more veteran plays with Eugene and with Graham Mertz, this game will be really interesting and close, like Vegas thinks, with a 2.5 point spread.
Yeah, anytime you can return a quarterback and continue to build upon that progression is great. I think Graham Mertz makes some strides. I would love to see it. At the other side of the ball is not returning a quarterback. They're grabbing another guy in Cam Ward coming over from Washington State. So while this might be Miami's biggest game this year, looking at their schedule and the easy-ish road that they had ahead of them, this isn't Florida's biggest game this year. They have all kinds of games ahead. How does that play out? Not sure, but we can look at Miami's team and see what they've done in trying to build their shot at the playoffs this year. And they've been winning the transfer portal game. They got Cam Ward, who very well could be in the NFL right now, almost 3,000 yards last year at Washington State. And then they picked up Damian Martinez, over 1,000-yard rusher at Oregon State. He is going to be somebody to watch on the Hurricanes this year. He's going to be a dog there. I think he's going to be a difference maker in this game. And we can't forget to talk about, your guy coming over from Houston, Sam Brown.
Yeah, Sam Brown was, the second leading receiver for University of Houston. Is making the jump over to the ACC with Miami, and it's almost like Miami just kind of put together this all Big 12, all Pac-12 or Pac-2 team with Washington State's Cam Ward, as you mentioned, and with Damian Martinez. Damian is going into this season top 5 running back in the country. So that could be tough for Florida's defense, which ranked about 71st last year. Nonetheless, I think that, Florida also made some really good pickups in the portal, picking up Grayson Pupp from South Carolina, as well as returning, sophomore safety Jordan Castle, who led the team with 60 tackles. And so when I look at Florida, I really do believe it was just a matter of putting the performances of each side of the ball together at the same time. Yeah. It's not like they're a team that just was struggling offensively all season. the defensive struggles were rough, but they made a change to the coordinator, so we should expect a new performance this year.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting, and I think there's a lot of bad blood there, right? You know, they don't get to play Miami every year. They don't get to play Florida State every year, but they do want to. This game means something, and it's in the swamp, and so it'll be really fun. And I don't know if players like Cam Ward and Martinez have ever been in an environment like this before, and Graham Mertz can't say the same because he has, right? And same with Eugene Wilson, who's coming into a sophomore year at receiver, and so we'll see.
Yeah, the big thing, and you mentioned it, changing in coordinators. I don't think we see a Florida defense like we saw last year. I think we see some upgrades. We see a change. I mean, Florida was second to last in the turnover battle last year, so they weren't getting turnovers. They lose their number one edge rusher for this year. So if they don't combine, if they lose tackles for loss and they lose the interceptions and fumble battle, then they're not going to have good field position all game. I don't expect to see that from them this year. I think that they turn it around. You mentioned it. The environment is going to be tough. It's a good start to the season. They have a long road ahead. Miami just looks a little bit too strong from my end. So I have a 17-24 Miami win.
Yeah. And, this might be one of the few times we agree from an SEC loss perspective, but I also have Miami taking it 24-17. Like I said last episode, it's not going to be about just wins and losses, but how Florida looks. Mm-hmm. Florida is recruiting really well. They have a lot of players, right? They don't want to lose Eugene Wilson, or they don't want to lose Montrell Johnson in the portal. Like these guys at running back, they have a lot of strong players to pick up from. It's just we'll see. But I have Miami taking this one 24-17. Should be a fun one nonetheless. And we'll see.
Let's get on a plane and head to the desert, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, Nevada for our next matchup. And that is going to be the USC Trojans, newcomer to the Big Ten, playing against the LSU Tigers.
Yeah, so this is the fourth game we're talking about here. This game will be on Monday, September 1st. You got a whole weekend of football, and it should be a fun one. USC comes in at number 23 in the AP in the coaches poll. LSU comes at number 13. Both teams are featuring new quarterbacks. So for USC, it's Miller Moss. He had I think a 6-touchdown performance against Louisville in the bowl game last year. He was able to win the job as a starting quarterback. And then, a major key player for USC to watch for is Zachariah Branch. I think he was a freshman, All-American, great returner. But on the LSU side, the major area of focus was defense. Always a strong area for them. They brought back their old defensive coordinator from Missouri, and so they're expecting to kind of return that stout, strong defense that was able to pick up some key wins a couple years ago against Alabama and in years past. This one should be a fun one. It's a pretty close spread. I forgot exactly what it was, but it's really close.
Yeah, we're looking at 4.5. I mean, you mentioned the defense at LSU. I think the defense at USC defense and USC are usually two words that don't go together. But they're changing things up there. You mentioned adding, putting Miller Moss in that starting position, and it would be a shame to ever doubt a quarterback under Lincoln Riley because we've seen his history at developing those. But looking at the defense there, they brought in the new defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn, who was over at UCLA and built a crushing defense there. Trying to bring that over, he brought some DBs with him. He brought some other players in from the transfer portal. So I think we'll see a transformed USC defense. Last year, 7 of 12 games, they gave up 34 or more points. That is, pretty rough, and everything's uphill from there. If they bring that same defense to this game, LSU will run away with it. I don't see that happening under this new DC out there. He did bring the DBs, changing a lot there. There's some questionability around the D line. So we'll see if Nussmeier and the Tigers can pull something together and attack this defense that they don't have tape on.
And we don't have tape on it. And, you hear us talk a lot about the portal. That's what's nice, right? At least if you don't have the players you think you need, maybe you don't express it the way Dion did last year. But if you don't have the players you think you need, you can get them in the portal. and that's kind of what USC did, and that's what LSU did a little bit. Brian Kelly alluded to the fact they didn't have a ton of money, or that they didn't feel like certain players were worth the money. But both teams did make some key additions. And both teams last year, if they had defenses, they had Heisman quarterbacks with Caleb Williams and with Jalen Daniels. So Jaden Daniels, but this year will be interesting. We just don't have a ton to go off of tape wise. We understand the key losses. Malik Neighbors for LSU and Jaden Daniels for LSU, and of course Caleb Williams for USC. But it really is a fresh start. Hunter has LSU in his playoff bracket. USC is flying under the radar, so we'll see if this ends up being a ranked win for LSU at the end of the season. But for me, I do have LSU covering. I ultimately think they will win this game 24-17. And so how about yourself, Hunter? You're probably expecting more of a higher offensive performance given the defenses.
I am, yeah. And USC flying under the radar. They're flying everywhere. They're going to be all over the country flying to their new Big Ten games. They don't have the luxury of staying on the West Coast anymore. So I'm sure that they would like to get the win that's close to home and delay the Big Ten entry for a little bit where they have to start hitting the airport. But no, I think that LSU attacks this defense. I think that it's still better than years past for USC on the defensive side. I think LSU comes out and puts up 34, wins 34-20, and is a great start to the LSU's campaign this season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited for in Baton Rouge and those fans, and extremely passionate fan base. And so we're both predicting wins. It should be a fun one. I'm just happy that the football is not stopping after Saturday this week. That's one of the best parts about week one.
We have the game of the week, the new SEC podcast game of the week, and that is going to be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish heading down to Texas and taking on the Aggies.
Oh yeah,
it's Mike Elko's return to A&M. I mean, he left A&M to go be the head coach at Duke, where he was exceptional, put on a great defensive showing there, ended up playing Notre Dame. And there's a whole bunch of, love triangle between these three teams that you can point a whole bunch of connections between. But in his return to A&M, he gets to play another school that he was the DC at many years ago, and that's the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, it should be a really fun one. And you talked about the love triangle. It's really, Mike Elko, as many know, maybe some don't, used to coach Riley Leonard. Mike Elko transferred, took a new job to A&M, and Riley Leonard transferred from Duke to Notre Dame. I mean, talk about an academic resume. He transferred at quarterback from Duke to Notre Dame. He was, some would say probably one of the best Duke quarterbacks in the history. It's him and Daniel Jones and maybe a couple others that I'm not familiar with, but he had a really great season last year before going down. He's probably one of the top 5 best quarterbacks that was in the portal. We talked about a couple today with Cam Ward probably being top 3. And for Elko, the question I wonder is it more of an advantage for him to know what Riley Leonard can do and how he plays, or is it more of an advantage for Riley Leonard to know how Elko runs his defense, considering that he practiced against it all season, right? Those are some of the big headlines, and there's a lot more kind of really to kind of digest and dive in there.
Yeah, and they were both at Duke, right? So, and this is nothing against Duke, but the resources and the weapons that you have on both sides of the ball when you go from a Duke to an A&M or a Duke to a Notre Dame is greater. Riley Leonard is going to have a greater supporting cast at Notre Dame, and Mike Elko is going to have different pieces to work with at A&M that he didn't have before. They did lose their powerhouse linebacker and Edgar and James at Texas A&M, so that'll be a position to keep an eye on. But they have a really strong supporting cast, returning cast, seniority there at A&M. And looking at them on paper last year, I think it was it might look worse than it was if you're just a box score reader, right? 4-4 in SEC play, but they recorded a net 74 yards. So they were winning the battle when it comes to yardage. They were just losing a couple close games that they had leads in or gave up a field goal at the buzzer. So if they can small tweaks and they can turn that around big time.
Yeah, and I think that the stat you mentioned around the yards is reflected in close games like with Ole Miss where they only lost by 3. And the season might have went different if Connor Wegman doesn't go down at quarterback. He's returning as a sophomore this year, and he had 16 touchdowns and 3 picks last year. So seeing what he can do week one, A&M's number 20 in the nation, Notre Dame's number 7, and yet A&M is favored. So that says a lot in terms of what Vegas and what other leading publications think about them. And so it'll be really interesting to see kind of how that quarterback duel goes out, and really how they how the first couple drives go, like how they feel each other out as teams.
Yeah, and looking at a Mike Elko defense, they're adaptable, they adjust. His defense last year at Duke was only giving up 19 points per game, and when they played Notre Dame, the issue there that they had, and part of the reason why they lost that game, is they were giving up 5 yards per carry. I don't think that the Notre Dame Fighting Irish is going to be able to capitalize that on his Texas A&M defense this year. They have too many weapons on the defensive side to stop that rush. It is going to be a chess match. I love defensive-minded coaches and defensive-minded games, and you got two in Marcus Freeman and Mike Elko.
Yeah, and you talked about it earlier, right? It's the resources at Duke are different than A&M. They're different than Notre Dame. You're going to get bigger players up front on the offensive line and the defensive line, just given the funds, given the prestige of the program. A&M is a football school, maybe a baseball school now with the SEC or with the National College World Series appearance. But bringing it back to football, there's bigger resources at A&M. And you saw that in some of the key pickups he made on defensive line, getting Ncaa from Purdue, led the Big Ten in sacks. And so he could potentially give Riley Leonard nightmares in the game. And also I really think about just, where is there going to be an explosive player to show up for A&M? They lost Evan Neal or Evan Turner last year at receiver. He ultimately went over to Oregon. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of where they're able to fill that production in, and ultimately see if they can pull out the win. So although there's a lot of positive changes, I think the Elko era will be positive. I'm going to pick Notre Dame in this one. I think, having a veteran like Riley Leonard, I would say he's going to be better than Sam Hartman. I think he just has, one, he's more mobile as a runner. I think he is a little bit sharper just from his football IQ. And you saw him win some really key games last year, beating Clemson week 1 in the season. And so I think he pulls us off at Notre Dame. But I do think it'll be pretty close.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I'm swinging the other way. If this game was in Indiana, I think the Fighting Irish would be favored here. I think Texas A&M gets that home field advantage under the night lights in College Station. So give me Texas A&M 23-20.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, I picked Notre Dame. I guess I got to give my score. I'm gonna take Notre Dame 28-14.
All right. Big hopes for the offense there. It's going to be a quarterback battle. Who's going to get the yards? Who's going to be able to convert downs? I think we see a pretty strong defensive showing on both fronts, but that's the game of the week. Game day is going there. We're excited to talk about it. So, and we're excited to debrief it afterwards. So
yeah, we're just excited to really have football to talk about. Like I keep saying it, but it's like, it's here. We have football coming up in a couple days, and then now we can sit down, watch, eat our best food, get in front of our TV, get in front of a bar, go to a game if you're local, right? If you're listening to this anywhere in the country, go to a game and really be able to feel it. So it'll be fun.
So those are the big games for the week. We have a lot to talk about in those. They aren't the only SEC teams playing. There are other teams that have some games this week, some tougher than others. As the season goes on, people won't be playing. Scheduling these sort of out-of-conference tune-up games, but we want to make sure we touch on them and give a quick rundown. We're going to do a 2-minute drill, maybe a little bit longer, and start with Arkansas Pine Bluff at Arkansas. It's pretty much a tune-up game, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much a tune-up game. It'll be an opportunity for us to see Talon Green at quarterback and see what he can do. The transfer over from Boise State, won the Mountain West Conference last year for Boise. We're expecting that to be a pretty big blowout, and a game that Sam Pittman would love to take. So that'll be fun. It kicks off on Thursday. So, get in front of your TV and get ready.
Yeah. Another Thursday game. We have Murray State at Missouri. Quick tune-up game as well. We're probably going to see a couple quarters out of the dynamic duo there. You might get to see a little bit of Luther Burden before he takes a seat probably later in the game. But those are the 2 Thursday games this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might notice here on this graphic if you're watching, and if you're listening, there's 9 ranked SEC teams to start the season. That's the highest amount of ranked teams. I think the second closest is the Big Ten at 5, right? So some of the other ranked matchups that we're going to see in terms of the teams is, we'll start from the highest to lowest, is Texas versus Colorado State. That one probably is the most interesting one. If you watch the Colorado versus Colorado State game last year, you saw they had a really good quarterback and a really good returner that returned, and I think Torrey Hunter. The spread is about 32. So that is, I think, pretty wide. I don't know if Texas covers, but I do think they take care of business effectively, and it should be a good opportunity for them to determine who is the best option at running back, given the CJ Baxter going down for them.
Yeah. Vegas has Colorado State putting up about 14. So we'll see if Texas can cover after that. Another big game. We have Western Kentucky at Alabama. This is going to be the first time to look at Kalen DeBoer's offense. This is also going to be TJ Finley's third chance to lose to Alabama on this third different team. So we will see the annual TJ Finley versus Alabama matchup.
Hey, let's not put any bad juju in the air there. I expect, the Western Kentucky offense is usually explosive. TJ Finley did have a good season last year at Texas State. Sometimes you just got to figure out where you fit, whether it's LSU or Auburn or Texas State or Western Kentucky. But it is a good opportunity for us to see what Alabama can do. I think Jalen Milroe just goes off. I feel I'm picturing Jalen Milroe playing on varsity mode on College Football 25. Maybe you get 4 touchdowns. You take him out in the fourth quarter. You get to see what Ty Simpson can do as a backup, and it should be rock chalk, pretty straightforward. If we move north, Mississippi State's playing Eastern Kentucky. EKU, FCS opponent. Mississippi State, we get to see what they can do with Blake Shapen at quarterback. It's the first game in the Jeff Lebby era as a head coach. And they have a really great receiver they brought in from UTEP to also to watch. So that should be fun. And then I'm really hot on Kentucky. So love to hear your thoughts on them playing Southern Mississippi.
I think Southern Miss at Kentucky, I don't think it's going to be too much of a game. I'm excited to see Kentucky put some of the pieces that they've brought into the team together. Brock Vandegrift bringing out his first game. I think it's going to be a good tune-up for him to get familiar with his receivers in a game scenario. Excited to watch it. It's going to be a night game there in Kentucky.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun ones at 7 p.m. You got I think Alabama's playing Western Kentucky around 7 Eastern. Kentucky's playing Southern Miss around 7 Eastern, and just really circling around the SEC. We're going to go back to Mississippi with Ole Miss playing Furman. Great opportunity to see what that new and improved Ole Miss offense can do. What Ulyss, I think Johnson can do at running back, taking over the production from Quinshon Judkins, and also what Trey Harris can do. This is a great opportunity for him to kind of put up some good numbers and earn that right to be the top receiver in the SEC, potentially over Luther Burden. What would you say is the most intriguing matchup out of the remaining slate? If whether we talked about it or haven't talked about it yet. No bias.
I think the most intriguing matchup I would say is Old Dominion at South Carolina. I think that's the most intriguing. On this, and the ones we haven't talked about, that's the closest spread, 21 points in Vegas. Old Dominion is known to be able to maybe take a game here and there. I don't think that they're anyone to scoff at. I think South Carolina has to come out here and work with sellers to put on a show and do what they can do. I think it'll be a little bit closer out of the gate than people are expecting.
So you're taking the spread as a seller's market?
I think that they cover late in the game. It's 21 points. I think that they're only up 14 and well into the third, and then put up a touchdown there in the fourth to take it, win by 24.
I could definitely see them taking care of business, especially late in the game. I put you on the spot there, but
it's all good.
It should be a fun one, and I think the last two is Tennessee at number 15. They're playing UT Chattanooga. This will be the second, I think, matchup this season where the main campus is playing the branch campus. I think Texas plays UTSA around like week 3 or week 4. There's no spread there from Vegas, so that tells you what they believe. And so Tennessee should take care of business. Again, new quarterback to watch. So that's a really major story to catch there with Ncaa. And then the last one would be Oklahoma versus Temple. I think Temple's quarterback's Kurt Warner's son, EJ Warner. And, it's a good opportunity for us to see Jackson Arnold. So that would be my major story is these games allow us to see new quarterbacks at Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, UK, as well as Mississippi State. So that's 5 new QBs. Great opportunity to kind of boost that out of conference schedule and gives all these teams, one less game to get to bowl game eligible. So ideally they only need five more after this week. The other thing is for UK and South Carolina, this is their last game before they play their first conference game against each other. So in week 2, South Carolina will be playing Kentucky. And so what they do in week 1 will be really important to see before they head into their SEC slate.
Yeah, you can tell a lot about a team when they play these games. It's not just, the people on the players on these teams that we're talking about, they're college athletes as well, and they can put up a fight just as good as anyone. So you are getting to see a good showing of what these teams will bring when they play, their conference games. One more we didn't hit on Alabama A&M going to Auburn. Again, nothing more than a tune-up game there. So just wanted to highlight that one. But again, this is the week 1 remaining slate. Wanted to talk about these games. It'll get smaller probably as weeks go on. We'll have a lot of these teams playing against each other. We'll be able to dive in a little bit deeper, but wanted to take a quick pit stop on that and make sure we covered it. But some big games this week. I mean, we're excited. It's week 1. Can't even sleep thinking about it.
Yeah, no, really excited here. I mean, I've been playing college football 25 every night, just getting excited and hearing Reese Davis and Kirk Herbstreit and the whole cast there. And, right now I think there's 16 games being played. As we get into the season, we'll have at least 7 or 8 SEC games played every week because, there's 16 teams. So minus a bye week, we're going to have at least, 8 to 7 matchups. But for this week, it's fun. It's exciting. When you tune in next week, we'll be able to recap the games and have something to really talk about, some film to look at, and some bright spots, some emerging players, some unexpected outcomes. But hopefully, the SEC comes out on top, and ultimately, it should be a really fun week 1.
Yep, great week 1. Excited to go over it. Let us know what you think about our picks. If we got anything right, if we got anything wrong, if we left out your favorite player, let us know. Any game breakers that some of these teams have that we are not aware of. Follow us on Instagram, the new SEC Media. Check us out, YouTube, Spotify. We're excited to get this going and excited to talk more about college football in the weeks to come.
Yeah, really excited about it. And, thank you for watching, listening, subscribe, as Hunter mentioned. And if there's anything you want to see that we haven't covered, let us know.
All right, let's get it. Week 1.
Oh, yeah.